and gentlemen, dogs and cats, Angela Duncan in the house. She's the Tax Lien Queen. Angela, what's up?
How are you today?
I'm excellent. Just as a quick side note, I've been really focusing on waking up early recently. What time do you wake up in the morning, if you don't mind me asking?
About 6:30.
6:30. Dig it. So I've always breathed to myself that I'm not a morning person. And what I'll end up doing is waking up around 8:30, just kind of like relaxing, And what happens is it's hard for me to get into the deep work during the day. And then at night, once the kids are in bed, I'm like, I'm drained. I just want to watch some TV for a little while, right? And so I have all this junk time and I'm like, no more. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. And so I've started waking up at 5 o'clock. I'm 2 weeks into it and I'm loving it. I'm loving waking up at 5.
You're changing your story. People tell themselves, I'm not a morning person, I'm not a night owl, but you can change your story.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about story. First, okay, so you're into tax liens in investing. And the first question I'm asking is, what the hell does that mean? So break it down. What does that mean? And why should I care?
Right. So tax lien, and I'm going to go very specific with Florida, because that's where I live and that's where I currently do tax lien investing. If you own a property, whether it's a house, condo, townhome, commercial property, you owe property taxes to the county and they need that money. They need to fund their budget. They've got purpose for that money and they're expecting for you to pay it. So when you do not pay it and you become delinquent, past due on that tax, then in Florida, they put it up for auction and investors like myself can come in, pay the government the money they need for their budget for that tax lien. I'm going to hold a piece of paper and they tell me what interest rate they're going to pay me for the money I'm giving them to float until the property owner either pays their taxes or the home gets sold. So either way, the property taxes come back, the government gets their money and I get interest. And it's just a great way for me to know what I'm getting into upfront and know exactly how much I'm going to make at the end of the day.
Dig it. Okay. So how did you get into this? Was this like, you graduate high school, graduate college, I'm going to get into tax lien investing. How did you get into this? How did you figure this trick out?
Oh, it's definitely by mistake. So I've been in real estate for about 20 years. I owned a top performing RE/MAX office for many years. I've been an investor, many different avenues, and I love numbers. So if I am at like Barnes & Noble and I'm looking at books, any book that has a number on the cover is appealing to me. So I came across a book called The 16% Solution and I thought, hey, I don't know what this is. I want to learn more about this tax lien investing. And that's kind of where my journey started about 5 years ago.
Interesting. To me, when I think about like investing in real estate, the first thing I think about is, well, I'm going to need probably a lot of money, right? And I need all this capital. I need money in the bank. How am I going to buy a duplex, quadplex, triplex, whatever, if I'm just barely making ends meet and I'm paying off my business, I'm doing my 401k, got to invest in the kids' college fund. And my wife, it's May, it's my wife's birthday, it's my daughter's birthday, it's my son's birthday, it's Mother's Day, it's anniversary. How do I actually raise capital? So how do I actually get the money together so I actually can invest in one of these tax lien properties?
Yeah, so taxes are relatively low for a lower priced home. So first you want to figure out what tax lien investing is. Do your research, find a mentor, find a coach, and understand the process that goes within the county that you are investing in. Start in your backyard. You can buy tax liens here in Florida and several of the counties for like $500. So you don't need thousands and thousands of dollars to go buy a rental property and own one piece of property. You can buy several tax liens as low as like $500, so it depends on what your buy box looks like. You've got to figure out what that makes sense for you, but you don't need a ton of money to get started. So that's why this is another reason why I love tax liens is because it is a conservative investment. You know what you're going to make up front, and you can start with a lot less money than other avenues or vehicles when it comes to real estate.
What was the first property you purchased? $500 blows my mind that I could actually get a slice of the pie. Tell me about the first property you got involved with through these tax liens.
Yeah, so I'm very specific in my buy box, right? I'm looking for a house. I don't want to touch a condo, a townhome. I don't want to get involved with an HOA because it could be problems for me later if I had to foreclose. And I drive by the properties. So I'm looking for a single family, freestanding house in the average neighborhood. And the taxes on that relatively low for someone who might be living there for a long time. And so I started off with $1,000, and that's where my bidding process started. I knew what my budget was. I knew the property that I wanted to bid on, And I was successful in that. And it's kind of just a sit and wait game. So you definitely, don't plan to get this money back right away. It's got to be something you can set aside for a couple years, but understand that the process is there, and then your money will get returned to you with the interest the county is providing to you. But it could be a sit and wait game. And I'm a patient person, and it doesn't take a lot of time to do this type of investing. So it's a great way to still be part of the real estate market without having put in a ton of work, and then you don't have to upkeep or have anything that you're going to do until at which time the tax lien is redeemed.
So, okay, so explain this to me a little bit more, right? So you've got your $1,000. Are you going to like the county clerk's office, or how are you, or the county appraiser? Where are you putting the money? Where is it sitting?
Thank goodness for technology. So for tax lien investing in Florida, it actually is an online auction platform. Okay. So tax liens or taxes become delinquent April 1st. So by the time the tax lien hits this online bidding platform, they close it out June 1st, usually every year. You've got a little bit of time to, one, look at the list that the county is providing. Go do your due diligence, your research, your lien search, drive by the property, figure out, we've got so much great technology with Zillow, Trulia, that you can kind of figure out what is the value of that property should you need to foreclose someday. So I'm doing a lot of due diligence before I even bid, which can be a little bit time consuming, but I also know that there's a very short time period in which I can bid, and it only happens once a year. So I'm dedicating that time to do my research, to do my bidding, and then hopefully I'm successful and winning a couple of the tax liens. And then I sit and wait till the next year to be able to do that process all over again.
Okay. So you said it starts, the marketplace opens, the auction starts on April 1st and ends on June 1st. Is that what you said?
Correct. So it's an online platform, and they do provide you with a list of properties that are available that you can buy the tax liens. So they want to give you obviously enough time to do your own due diligence, but it's also a very short window and it can go by really quickly. So create your own buy box. What does that look like to you? And then focus on filtering down to those properties so that you can spend maybe a weekend or two driving by and doing your due diligence, while you still work your full-time job during the week.
And so then what happens next? When do I get my money back? So I put down my bid. How do I find out that I've actually won the bid? Because by the way, anytime I'm putting down money on a raffle, or it's like I'm co-opted. My brain cannot think about anything else until I find out. So if you're like, well, 2 years later, you'll find out. I'm like, I can't take it. I need to know.
Not that long. And I definitely understand the loop. The brain wants to close that loop, which is great technique for a lot of people who speak on stages. That's a whole other topic, though. You're going to know by the time the auction closes whether or not you won it, and have that money ready because the government's coming for you. They want their money. You said you're going to bid on something. They took your bid. They're going to expect payment right away. So if you're bidding on, say, 15 tax liens, make sure you have enough cash available to pay for all of those, because they're not lenient. They're only going to give you a short time to turn around, depending on the county, to turn around and make that payment. So you'll know right away whether or not you've won once that auction closes.
Okay. And so once I've won, I've given over my money to the government, which that would be the first time I've ever done that. No, just kidding. That happens pretty regularly. So we give our money to the government. Then what happens? Then we wait to get our interest back. Explain to me what happens next.
Yeah. So the process, and you're right. So this is like one of the few times you're giving the government money and they're paying you interest, right? This is a whole other dynamic. We're usually giving them money and they don't pay interest. They're just taking the money from us. But yes. So once the auction closes, one of several things could happen. One, the property owner could pay back their taxes, right? That's the ideal situation. Perhaps they lost a job. Perhaps they, had a medical condition, or they had a death in the family and they weren't able to pay the property taxes in time. So hopefully within the next few years, they're going to pay their taxes, which means you get your investment back plus the interest that the county has told you they're going to pay you. Now, worst case scenario, say in the state of Florida, 3 years goes by and they haven't paid their taxes. Well, I've got this certificate and now I can work with my attorney and do a foreclosure and take the deed of that property back. So understand that you could have a property at the end of the day. It could be a couple years before you get your money back, and you'll have to make sure you're doing that research up front, because if I own a property, I want to make sure that I can flip it, right? I want to get rid of it as soon as possible, or maybe you're going to fix it, keep it, fix it, rent it out. But for me, if I have to foreclose, then I definitely want to get rid of that property so that I can go right back into passively doing the tax lien, because I don't want to be a landlord at the end of the day. That's not my purpose with what I'm doing, but it could be yours. You have to decide that up front before you start your bidding.
Yeah. And so you don't actually have like a piece of the property in that case. When you're buying down the debt, I guess, on the front end by yourself, you're not like splitting with other people, right? So if a foreclosure happens, you're the solo owner. You're not stuck with like 4 other owners, right?
Well, yeah, the property tax lien is first in line over a mortgage, over, a roof not being paid, something like that. The government does obviously want to get their money first.
Right. Okay, cool. So that takes precedent. What are the interest rates? I mean, at the end of the day, what does the interest rate look like? Inflation is quite high right now. I mean, there's different reports coming back, but I at least want to make sure I'm, over inflation. Like what do the interest rates actually look like? How are those determined?
Yeah, so this is part of your due diligence. It varies from county to county, state to state. Florida pays up to 18%. So I want to emphasize up to 18%, because when you're bidding on how much interest you're willing to accept. I usually stay in the 10 to 12% range. If I'm going in at 18%, someone else could come in and say, I'll take that same certificate, but government, you only have to pay me 16, or you only have to pay me 12. So know that you're competing with other people who might be willing to take less, but that's part of your buy box. What are you going to look for in your return? So I want to beat the stock market. And, I'm not a huge believer in the stock market. I'm a big believer in real estate investing, but I still want to make sure that the returns make sense for me. So understanding what that could look like for you. Now, in other states, like Illinois pays up to 72%, Iowa pays up to 24%. So, do your due diligence, look and do the research, but definitely start in your backyard before you expand over state lines. I personally have been doing this for a little bit. I don't even go to other states because I can't go look at the property. I don't know the area. I don't know the demographic. I don't know, a lot that goes on in that area. So I'm going to stick to an area in which I know and understand.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, that's the other thing. It feels like there's just so much data, and like home prices have soared over the last few years. Taxes, insurance. Mm-hmm. I just wonder about the volatility of the situation. I mean, I live down here in Florida. My last home I was living in, we bought it at 165. 9 years later, we sold it at 415. So we 2.5x'd over 2.5 years, or over almost 10 years, which is crazy to me. And then with the mortgage rates are really high, and the Fed, like, it's almost overwhelming to think about all the factors going into it. How do you process all the data and all the information, Angela?
Yeah, well, on that example that you just gave, if you bought a property and you homestead it, right? Even if the value doubles, triples, that doesn't mean your taxes is going to double and triple, because in the state of Florida, we have a cap. When it comes to homestead properties, they can only raise the taxes the 3% every year. So For you as the owner, your taxes aren't going to go up as much as an investor. The investor has no cap. So if the market triples, then good luck to you, right? Insurance, the same thing with the homeowner. So I don't want all those headaches. When it comes to buying a rental property, you have to think about all of those things. What are my taxes going to be next year? Who knows? What's insurance going to be? Could be double and triple. I've seen that. I've owned an insurance company, so I understand that. This vehicle is much different. And so when you understand how it works and understand what your own buy box is going to be, you're not going to run into those same things that you could as owning the actual physical real estate is going to have.
Makes sense. No, it makes sense. Well, that was the other consideration. We were considering, hey, maybe we should rent out our home, but it gets complicated because you have like portability of your homestead, and your tax rate can go up. And then, like you said, your insurance goes up. And what if you have a bad tenant? And then there were all these different things. But I mean, on the side note, which this is another quick aside, as an entrepreneur, there's so many different opportunities out there, which is one of the challenges I have with the show. I'm talking to people all over the world that are crushing with all these different business ideas. And I was like, I see these people, they're crushing with real estate investing, and they're renting out their homes, and they've got this whole fleet of properties that they're renting out. But then you don't really consider, okay, well, the property manager, the taxes, the insurance, the tenants, the lease agreements, the attorneys, the claims. So, this idea is interesting to me. What is like the next step if I wanted to go deeper, right? So morewithangela.com is your website, but like, I feel like I would need a little bit more information before I was able to actually like choose the right property? Do I just like ask ChatGPT how to figure it out, or what's the next move?
Yeah, this is the one place I say AI technology isn't going to be very helpful for you because you've got to do your due diligence, right? The biggest thing is doing the lien search. You can partner with an attorney or a title company. I have a title company that I work with. I want to know what other liens are on the property. Is there a mortgage? Is there anything else that's past due that they haven't paid? The only thing that really trumps a property tax is an IRS tax lien. So that's difficult sometimes to figure out, have they paid their federal taxes? Of course, in Florida, we don't have state income tax, but that could be something that could be in front of it. And we don't always know. So we do our best attempt to do all of that due diligence. And if you think about it, yes, I might only earn 10% on this type of vehicle, but I'm really only working for April to June to do my research, to do my due diligence, to figure out which properties I'm going to bid on. And then the rest of the year, I'm kind of sitting and waiting. Now, I am in real estate, so I do pay attention to the market. I pay attention to interest rates, what the economy is doing, things like that. But I'm not really full time in it, except for those 2 months when the bidding auction is going to happen. So it's really passive for me. I'm not getting calls about toilets being broken on Christmas. I'm not getting worried that the interest rate is going to, or the insurance rate is going to triple. So I like this vehicle for myself. I'm conservative. I like to know what I'm going to make up front. I like to know what my potential return could be later. And it's just a more passive way for me to grow my wealth outside of owning physical real estate.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, and it's funny when you say I like to invest conservatively, because I have a friend of mine who is not that way. And a few years ago, he was like, Mark, you got to get on this website. The returns on this crypto are crazy. I'm getting this kind of returns. Turns out it was FTX was the company he was with. Didn't work out so well for him, So with great reward comes great risk, I guess is what I would say. But I got to also say, Angela, anytime someone says, well, AI is not that great for this, I'm like, challenge accepted. That's what I feel. I'm like, there's got to be ways to use AI to be more proficient, right? So the way I think about this is, obviously, looking, doing IRS stuff, tax lien stuff. I do feel like getting an attorney involved makes sense there. But what about looking at all the properties themselves, right? So what if we went to Zillow or to the MLS and we downloaded a big spreadsheet with all the different criteria, upload that, let ChatGPT, let our large language model evaluate all the criteria to look for opportunities? Is that something that you've been seeing in the industry? Like, what are you seeing in the real estate industry when it comes to AI usage?
Yeah, so I would say you could. I use a website called privy.com, and it helps me to evaluate what properties might be undervalued for the area. And I might look those properties up and figure out if there's a tax lien. The problem with using like MLS or Zillow is what happens if, we just had 7 straight days of massive rain. I think we got 20 inches. How do you know if that property is flooded in the past few months? Zillow's not going to tell you that. What if there was a fire and the property is no longer there and you just have a piece of dirt? I'm not buying dirt. I'm not buying a tax lien on dirt. So there's so many things that could change within a few months that those type of technology aren't going to pick up right away. And they may not for years, Zillow, Google did a drive-by on a property. That's why if you do Google Streets, you can see what the property looked like, but it captured it in that moment. You don't know what's happened since that moment. So that's why I highly recommend to still drive by the property to see the asset that you might be an owner of someday and understand what it could look like. Now, granted, if I buy that tax lien today, same thing could happen. The home could burn down, right? Between the time I buy the tax lien and maybe the time I foreclose, then yeah, that could happen. So I would say that that's a risk that I'm taking, right? But I want to know what the property looks like the day that I'm bidding on it. And that's why it's important for me to do the drive-by. So I would love to know if there's some real-time technology out there that I don't know about that can tell me what that property looks like. But I know Google, Zillow, Trulia, none of those are going to show you real-time today.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. I would think of like maybe like anytime there's a spreadsheet involved, AI just really excels at that sort of thing. I'll actually give you an example, but I think the key for me is like whenever I'm using AI and integrating that into my workflow is how do I use the AI to empower the expert? How do I use the AI to empower the human, right? Because there's hallucinations and things that the AI will get wrong or won't know. So and I'll give you an example of how I use this recently. I was hiring for a position in my agency, and I put a job listing out on a board and I said, hey, if you're interested, fill out this form to apply. And on that form, it had various questions like, what's your work experience? Is English your first language? What are some particular KPIs that you're looking at? How would you improve those KPIs? Just various like specific measurements that the expert would know. Had about 2-3 dozen people fill out the form. And then what I did was I sent all the results from that form to ChatGPT. ChatGPT automatically read all the results and gave each applicant a rating from 1 to 10. And so instead of personally going through and trying to figure out who's going to be the best fit or not, ChatGPT gave me that. And I just interviewed the top 3 who scored from 8 to 10. And they were awesome. I ended up hiring 2 of the 3 because they were so good. And so that's kind of the way I think about it. Like, instead of having to go around and drive by 15 properties, I could use ChatGPT to say, hey, based on the criteria that you're looking for, based on all the data that we're seeing here on these charts, maybe just start, these are the two premiums. I mean, would that kind of an approach make sense?
Yeah, maybe if we said, which of these properties are most likely to, pay their property taxes back, or maybe which one is most likely to go into default or foreclosure, then maybe it might be able to give me a better decision process based on what my buy box is. I'd be curious to test that out. So thanks for the idea, and I think I'm going to try that one.
Very well, because you would know who the owner is of the property, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is another thing. I was speaking to a guy about 8 months ago, Mike Wynn. He was another guest on the podcast, and he developed a calendar scheduler that anytime someone would schedule a time on your calendar, it would automatically scour the web for all the information on that person. Right. So if you could combine, and I got to follow up with you on that, see how that's going. But I feel like if you could combine that with some sort of screening technology, because that will be able to calculate like, oh, this person actually doesn't live in the United States, or is in prison, or is actually going into collections on 3 credit cards, or the amount of data available on every single human being is unprecedented, right? So much data that it's hard for, I think, our human brains to process, which is a place where AI, I think, could excel. I'd be very interested to see if we can develop something here.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I was saying before the show, I was nervous to be on your show because one of the things you focus on is AI. And I feel like I'm terrible when it comes to AI and using, tools out there that could help make this process easier. I've been very old school, so I would love to know what other technology is out there that could really streamline the process, cut back the time. I could look at more properties potentially, and then maybe have a better rate of return because I'm using AI to tell me what the probability is of the client paying their taxes back, because that's what my buy box is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and look, the game hasn't even started yet. I think when it comes to AI, the fact that you're already thinking about, well, maybe I could use it to do this, or, Mark was talking about this idea, that puts you in like the top 1% of thinkers in this space. I know everyone's talking about AI this, AI that. Y'all ain't talking about nothing. Like, we're actually getting into the weeds here on some actual practical applications, ways to save lots of time and money. So, Angela, love what you're talking about. Again, by the way, AI without the expert is useless. It's the expert who leverages the AI that becomes incredibly efficient, because AI it doesn't get it right all the time. You need an expert's eyes to poke holes. And I can give you lots of examples. I'm not going to right now, because we all can see it with our eyes. So, Angela, where's the best place for us to find you on the web?
Yeah, morewithangela.com is my website. And if you go to morewithangela.com/fire, I do have a free ebook that just gives you some tips to get you started on your own tax lien investing journey.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, dogs, and cats. Angela from morewithangela.com. Thanks for joining the show and teaching us about this interesting form of investment. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for listening to Empower Her Money podcast. I am grateful for you. Please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, like this podcast, share it, subscribe, and let's keep teaching others how to take control and be empowered with their finances.